Today we're discussing knight forks, or at least in this example we are. We're playing as black. We're playing on the Dr. Chess website. As you can see, white gets off to a good start here. They put pressure on the f7 pawn, to which black responds by pushing their pawn forward. Now there's actually a setup here where black can move the c6 knight to d4, threatening the queen and potentially setting up a fork. We'll look at that in a few moves. Right now we're just working on developing pieces here. And this move right here is very effective against players that aren't super highly rated. If you do this against a skilled player, this move is not going to work as effectively. They're going to see it most of the time. So we play pretty much knight to d4. Okay, we're threatening the queen. But more importantly, we're looking to get to the c2 square and fork the king and the rook and capture the rook. We're looking to win material that way. Our knight's probably going to be lost. Although we could also use this knight for some other stuff as well. You know, if white does the right thing and plays their queen back to d1. So this move has value. Even if a good player sees the move, it has a lot of value in terms of, you know, white has to defend that's the c2 square. So white could also castle, but they're going to lose a queen. So white has to move their queen in this spot. So this is a real strong move because worst case scenario, you've got a knight in good position. You can develop another piece, and you know white's got their queen back, defending with not as many developed pieces. In a better case scenario, white doesn't see the move, and you're able to capture a rook. And in this game, it gets even better. White decides to play queen to e3. Okay. Well, that makes it even better, as you can probably see.
Check.
Here's a check right there. And now, you know, as black, we can take the knight, we can take the rook or the queen. And of course, we're taking the queen right there. So, real good situation right there. We got control of the middle, and now we can clear out pieces.
Queenside castle in.
And that leads to a nice victory right there. This next example of a knight fork takes place on pretty much the same square with a little bit different variation of how this plays out. Again, I'm playing as black here, looking to get the knight to the b4 square and then threaten the c2 pawn. Should be, I believe, the next move right here. White moves its queen away, so white doesn't have any pieces defending the c2 pawn. Now white could castle here, which might be a better move given how strong the position is. But we decided to play it as a shot in the dark. If it doesn't, you know, if they do castle, we could win the c2 pawn and possibly open up a file. We could castle to the left side. There's a lot of variations to this fork here. Not just the fork itself in terms of material, but we're looking in terms of position and figuring out a way to win the game. White has a number of options again, as we've stated. You could pull the queen back to guard the c2 pawn, or you can castle, give up the pawn, or there's there's a couple options here. White could take the rook and put it to c1 to guard the pawn. So there's a number of different options here for white. Again, a stronger player might take one of those moves. White decides not the worst move in the world. Well, it is, and we'll see why. White decides to take the king on e1 and move it to d1 to guard the pawn. Okay, so not so bad in itself. Okay, I follow with pawn to a5. And here's the big mistake white makes. White decides to put the pawn to a3, threatening to take the knight. Okay? One little problem with this position right here. White's rook is kind of exposed here. So, and we'll see why. So,
Kinside castling.
I decide, as soon as I see that, I decide to castle the left side. I got, 2 rooks, a queen, some pawns. I've got bishop. I'm going to be attacking the right side heavy now. My original plan was to attack the left side, but that changed.
Kinside castling.
They decided to go ahead and capture the knight that we're going to fork with. So the fork didn't work, but it worked really big time here. So we decide to capture right there. They could play rook takes. Decide not to.
Check.
We take the rook. Check. Now there's a pin. Move the queen into position. White doesn't want to give up material here. We take that, and white concedes on the game. Our last fork comes against black. We're playing again as white in this example here. Black is rated at 1900, so nothing easy here. What I decided to do with this move right here is just push the pawn forward to block their bishop on g7. And then they offered an exchange right here. After thinking over for a while, I decide not to take it. It's typically not a good idea to take exchanges that are offered against good players, because usually you got to find a better move if you want to beat them. Otherwise, if you trade off material, they'll beat you. So anyway, I give up the pawn there, but what I'm looking to do is open up a file, potentially for a rook or some other pieces, and attack the right side, develop the bishop. And the fork is coming, develop the other bishop here. Okay, here is where they decide to offer another, or the player decides to offer another exchange, offering pawn for pawn. I don't like doing that. There's a number of options. I could push the pawn forward, but I eventually decide on, after looking at the knight, I'm thinking I could potentially do a fork. If you'll notice, the g5 square is protected, but more importantly, if I can get the knight to, let's say, e6, I can get a fork between the queen and the bishop, which would, I'd like to get rid of the bishop, and I wouldn't mind getting rid of the queen either, but, so that's what I decided to do. And so I decided to give up my piece, sacrifice the pawn, and play the knight forward right there to g5. Okay, they go ahead and they capture. And they're threatening both the knight and the bishop there, except one little thing. Once I play the knight right there, there's a fork. If you can see, I could take the queen or I could take the bishop. So black is faced with a dilemma. Black could get a piece here, but I can capture the queen. So they're losing the queen, which makes it a tough game. And they got a bad position relative to, because we got both our bishops. Well, -1 if he got that. Now, if black decides to protect his queen, then we can capture the bishop on g7, check, and there's no piece that can block it. So black would have to move its king, and then we could recapture with the bishop from e. We can capture the pawn on d4 with the e3 bishop. That would protect the knight, and it puts black king in a bunch of trouble. And this player actually resigned at this point, which kind of surprised me, but they would have been in a world of hurt with no pawns protecting the king in that spot, and we had the ability to bring more pieces, including, let's say, queen to, let's say, f3. So this fork was very, very effective. Did not expect to get it against a player. Again, this player is rated 1900. This fork right here came against a player rated around 1800. We are playing as white here, and it was an unexpected fork. Again, get the bishop developed, aiming at the f7 square. That's going to be important later on as we continue to develop pieces, opening up a lane for the other bishop, the c1 bishop, that is. And if you'll notice, they responded by blocking with the pawn there. So that takes away the idea of trying to set up a quick check fork or checking with the bishop. So I decided to push the pawn, looking to come to my second attack. Some combination of bishop, knight, queen, maybe a rook. They go ahead and develop their knight there. I decide to push the bishop, and the idea is to back it with the queen. They play knight to the corner. I want to protect my c4 bishop, so I move it back right there. Got to protect it. Again, aiming at the f7 square there. I push the pawn forward.
Queenside castling.
And of course, I decide to castle. The idea here is actually to play the knight to g5, not for a fork. The idea is to get them to capture with the pawn on h6. I recapture with the h4 pawn, and then I've got two rooks I can send and get them on black's row 8. And then I can bring a queen, I can bring a bishop, I can bring a lot of pieces. I still have a knight on, well, yeah, we still have the c3 knight as well. So that's the idea. So I decide to play knight to g5. Okay, so the idea is knight's getting sacrificed here. All right. Well, after thinking it over for quite a while, black decides to play, and I'm not sure what to play as black here, so black decides to play knight back to d7. Okay. And I'm like, at first, I've totally forgot about the fork here, because my original idea was they were going to trade with the sacrifice. But that's one of the things about playing is you kind of got to be a little bit open-minded. Like, you have a couple ideas of how things are going to go, and then you need to be able to change on the fly if you want to have a chance to be able to win anyway. But anyway, you can see the fork right here. Simply, and remember, the f7 square is protected by the bishop on a2. So we take right there, and after thinking over for quite a while, black decides to protect their rook. We take the queen, and that should be just enough of an advantage to be able to grind down the game here, as long as there's no crazy trade-offs. But yeah, that was a big portion of being able to eventually win this game here.
Check.
Obviously, it's not a complete lock.
Check.
Here's a tricky spot here as well. What I decided to do is, if you'll notice, black has the rook on d8. So I decide to take the bishop and check to get rid of the other bishop, and then be able to bring my queen to protect against the bishop checking. Because the bishop can check by taking the c2 pawn, and then they could bring, I can't recapture here, so we're able to do that, keep them in, and then play another check right here, and then take winning material with another check fork. Actually, that's a check fork with a queen, if you'll notice right there, check, and then taking that, and then here's another tricky spot right here. Decide to play I believe it's, yeah, rook forward there. And then decide to play queen, check. And then that's the game right there. But anyway, I would like to thank you for watching this on forks, knight forks mostly. And hopefully I was able to show you a trick or two. And yeah, thanks for watching, and good luck.